This House do now adjourn. Chris Vince.
Hey. Thank you. We got there. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and my sincere thanks to the Minister for taking time to engage in this crucial debate. The issue of taxi licensing is not just a technical matter, it strikes at the heart of fairness, safety and the livelihoods of hard-working taxi drivers in my constituency of Harlow and the surrounding villages like Lower Nasing. While this is a nationwide concern, as well hopefully by evidence by so many MPs speaking today, I will focus primarily on the experiences in Harlow. I am not here to rehash any arguments surrounding the 2015 Deregulation Act, which was introduced with the best intentions, but we cannot ignore the reality. The unintended consequences of the legislation have left taxi drivers vulnerable, passengers at risk, and the integrity of local oversight severely compromised. I will give way.
Thank you. I would like to congratulate my honourable friend from Harlow for giving way and congratulate him on the points that he's making at this excellent speech. In 2022, the independent report into child sexual exploitation in Telford was published, and in that report, concerns were highlighted that, quote, so far as national policy is concerned, aspects of taxi licensing undermine rather than promote best practices in respect of tackling child sexual exploitation. Does he agree with me that those concerns should be set out, should be addressed by the Minister?
Thank you, and I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I'm sure that the Minister will address those concerns in his closing remarks. That is why, and moving on from my speech, that is why I have sought this debate to bring attention to the growing dangers fostered under the current system. The 2015 Act has opened a loophole allowing private hire drivers to licence their vehicle in district authorities far from where they operate. In practice, this means that drivers are no longer bound by standards. I'm just going to carry on for a little bit and I'll come back to you. Bound on local standards. Instead, they can shop around for the cheapest licence anywhere in the country, then return to work wherever they choose. Harlow has long had the gold standard for its taxi services, standards our local drivers proudly meet. Why? Because they know, as I know, that nothing is more important than safety of their passengers. I will give way.
Thank you for the honourable member giving way. Taxi licensing enforcement is funded by licence fees. However, with the ongoing race to the bottom of licensing issuing standards, local authorities are unable to enforce externally issued licences, and any measure to our local authorities to enforce will simply stretch enforcement budgets beyond sustainability. Does the honourable member agree with me that the solution has to be guided by the principle that drivers and cars should operate in areas which they are licensed?
Can I just remind members that interventions should be short and Chris Vince.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you for your intervention. I absolutely agree that the principle that actually it should be the local authorities that actually have the licensing. The cross-border hiring is undermining these high standards. It strips councils like Harlow of the power to oversee and enforce proper registrations. A driver, I'm going to carry on just briefly and then I'll let you come in. A driver who loses their licence in one district can simply apply for a licence elsewhere and continue operating with little or no scrutiny. Local authorities lack the enforcement powers to police out-of-town drivers, and this leaves a gaping hole in our public safety framework. We can claim to protect our constituents when such fundamental weaknesses exist in our system. I will give way.
Thank you, and I welcome the member for bringing this actual subject in. Do you agree with me that this lack of scrutiny that you've sorry, tired, I need to go to bed. The lack of scrutiny may pose a risk to members of the public, particularly in safeguarding, in safety of vehicles. And in Sheffield, where I am from, the licensing team are unable to check the vehicles on the road and whether they are being driven by proper licence.
I thank my friend for intervention, and you're right, this is not just a bureaucratic oversight, it's public safety crisis waiting to happen. Vehicles are not being inspected regularly enough, drivers are not being vetted thoroughly enough, and passengers who trust that any taxi they step into is safe are the ones left exposed. Taxis often serve, I'm going to just carry on, I will come in for you in a second. Taxis often serve the most vulnerable members of our community. Can we truly say we're doing our duty to protect them under those conditions? The inconsistency in signage requirements across different districts only deepens the confusion. In Harlow, we enforce clear and visible signage, a rooftop box for taxis, door signs for private hire vehicles. Not every district requires this. As a result, passengers are left guessing whether the vehicle they are entering is legitimate and safe, and local councils are forced to battle through bureaucratic layers to justify the safety and legislation of those vehicles. This is unacceptable. This deregulation hasn't just lowered standards, it has put lives at risk. We cannot wait for an accident, a tragedy, to spur us into action. We must be proactive, not reactive. We need legislation that reflects the pace of modern life and demands of today's safety standards. We cannot fall behind. I'll let the gentleman come in.
Can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Harlow for bringing this forward? And does the Honourable Member not agree that the safety of users and the experience of knowing that an officially licensed taxi driver has been thoroughly vetted is something that many people take for granted? And if this is not true, then urgent changes must take place to ensure that vetting is as stringent as checks for insurance and indeed for a clean licence.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention, and I would agree with his intervention. Absolutely, what we're talking about is passenger safety. And if somehow we could set aside the issue of safety, though I believe we cannot, there's other grave consequences of the legislation. It is undermining the livelihood of our taxi drivers. Drivers operating under cross-border licences often lack the local knowledge necessary to provide the level of service passengers expect. This erodes trust. I'm just going to carry on this bit. This erodes trust in the industry at a time when we should be championing local businesses. We are instead creating obstacles for them. How can I or anyone in this chamber look our local taxi drivers in the eye and tell them we are truly on their side? Right now, I cannot. But by addressing these issues head on, we can change that narrative. So I will let the lady come in and then I will...
I'm really grateful. The member for Harlow is making an excellent speech. Would he agree with me that we need to see a repeal of the 2015 Deregulation Act measures, but also in a place like York, where we have a tourism industry, that this is deeply damaging for the tourism industry as well? So that's why we need to see the repeal.
I thank my friend for intervention, and absolutely part of what I'm talking about is that issue. And actually, we want to support our local taxi drivers because actually that is part. I'm going to make progress. So my appeal. So Madam Deputy Speaker, let me share some first-hand accounts from the taxi drivers of Harlow. My appeal to the Minister is simple. This is from the taxi drivers themselves. Will he commit to take action? Will he consider reforming the law to introduce national minimum standards, empowering councils to enforce regulations across border, and ensure that private hire journeys either start or finish within licensed area? These steps are critical, not just for restoring fairness in the industry, but safeguarding of the public. I will give way because you've got to go there.
First of all, a huge thank you to the member for Harlow for bringing forward this debate. It's such an important one, not only for taxi drivers, but for the safety, particularly of women and girls at the end of a night when too often things happen. Would he agree with me that deregulation has led to an increase in that, a decrease in their safety, especially when you have councils like Milton Keynes, who are a white ribbon city, and ensure that white ribbon is part of the taxi licensing regime?
I thank my friend for intervention, and you're right to say that the different authorities have different standards. So actually, if we are not being licensed in the authority where that taxi operates, then actually that is one of the issues. I will let my honourable friend come in.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for giving way to so many of us and for securing this important speech. Taxi drivers in my Leeds East constituency and in West Yorkshire and elsewhere really suffered during the COVID pandemic. And isn't it the case that under the current regulatory framework in relation to cross-border licensing, this is actually enabling some of the bigger operators to rip off hard-working taxi drivers by making sure they actually don't get the income that they need and deserve, especially after COVID?
I thank the friend for his contribution. You're absolutely right to say that actually COVID hit taxi drivers in my constituency very hard as well, and actually we want to do what we can to support them, and actually repealing some of this legislation would help to do that. My final paragraph, you'll be pleased to know, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just want to say this is not just about needless red tape. It is about essential regulation. I'm going to finish. It is about essential regulation that protects lives and livelihoods. The hard-working taxi drivers, whom so many of us depend on, deserve a level playing field. And above all, passengers deserve to know that when they step into a taxi, they are safe. I urge the Minister to consider these proposals so we can create a safer, fairer and more consistent taxi trade for all.
I call the Minister, Simon Lightwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't know about you, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I feel the Westminster Hall debate may be coming on soon. First of all, I would like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Harlow, for securing the debate today. The taxi and private hire vehicle, or PHV, as I'll refer to them, sectors provide a vital service to our communities, whether it's taking the elderly people to their hospital appointments or making sure that children can meet their education. Every day, our hard-working taxi and PHV drivers show up and deliver an excellent service. The benefits of having a thriving taxi and PHV sector cannot be underestimated. These services play a crucial role in our leisure and tourism industries, taking passengers to and from airports and railway stations, and in our nighttime economies, making sure everyone, particularly young women and girls, can get home safely after a night out when other modes of transport might not be available. And that is why I'm so pleased to see this great industry being debated in the House tonight. I'm sure that other members here will recognise and applaud the work of our taxi and PHV drivers and operators do. Turning to my other friend's point about the Deregulation Act of 2015, I would like to take this opportunity to share what I've learned since becoming the Minister for Local Transport about this issue. The Deregulation Act of 2015 did not enable PHVs to work anywhere. PHVs and taxis have always been able to fulfil bookings anywhere. Evidence submitted to the Transport Select Committee in 2011 shows that out-of-area working was an issue long before the 2015 Act. The Deregulation Act enabled the subcontracting of bookings to operators licensed by other authorities, as was already allowed under the legislation that applies in London. This was introduced to enable an operator to more easily meet customer requests. Rather than decline or cancel a booking, I will give way.
I'm grateful to the Minister giving way, Madam Deputy Speaker. I must declare interest as the son of a long-standing taxi driver. And I wonder if the Minister would agree with me that taxi drivers, as they have proven during COVID, are indeed key workers and key to our economy. And furthermore, that in recent years, their business costs, specifically their insurance costs, have risen to a prohibitively high level. And will he undertake to investigate the root causes of these rising business costs which are stifling individual taxi drivers from maintaining their businesses?
Yeah. I thank my other friend for his intervention. I agree that our taxi trade played an absolutely vital role during the COVID pandemic and will of course take away his comments. So rather than decline and cancel a booking, if an operator did not have a driver and vehicle available, the ability to subcontract to another operator, often within the same company, meant passengers would be better served as they would not have to find an alternative. The operator could do that for them. Ending the subcontracting of bookings to operators licensed by another authority would not stop out-of-area working. Under current legislation, it would remain possible for PHV or a taxi licensed by any licensing authority to carry passengers anywhere. If subcontracting was banned again, and in London for the first time, operators could choose to license with a single authority or have regional hubs and direct all bookings through these. I turn now to cross-border hiring, or I believe out-of-area working more accurately reflects the real issue. The difference is that, and I hope we can all accept that, people naturally travel across local authority borders, and some flexibility in the licensing system is beneficial to both passengers and the sector. Out-of-area working is the practice of which PHV driver licenses with one authority but intends to work predominantly or exclusively in other areas. PHVs provide a wide range of services such as home-to-school transport, executive hire and other specialised services. We need to ensure that our regulation of the sector provides the necessary flexibility whilst ensuring local authorities have the tools that they need to deliver on their objectives for the industry.
For giving way. He won't necessarily be aware, and I wouldn't expect him to be, nor the move of this a German debate, who I congratulate for securing it, that as Minister of Transport, I commissioned a major piece of work on taxi licensing. The report was conducted by Professor Mohammed Abdul Haq, and all the recommendations of the report were accepted by the then government. They were focused on safety and the relationship of the protection of passengers and licensing. I invite the Minister to take a look at that report. It is not partisan, and I'm sure there's much in it that might inform this debate and service some of the requirements that have been so admirably cited by the mover of this motion.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention and will certainly take a look at his report. I understand that there are concerns about authorities' ability to carry out effective enforcement in their areas, especially against drivers and vehicles that they themselves have not licensed. We're considering numerous options to address this, but I would also urge some caution. Certain options could have a negative consequence both for the sector and for the passengers. Restricting operations could reduce the availability of services, increasing fares and waiting times for passengers and more dead miles for drivers. I think the last thing any of us would want to do is to drive members of the public into the cars of those unlicensed and unvetted waiting at the roadside or offering rides on social media. We also need to consider the context we are working within. In England, there are 263 licensing authorities, a high number of authorities responsible for licensing, in some cases, a very small number of drivers and vehicles which serve a small area. There is a balance to be struck here. I won't give way, I need to make some progress. There is a balance to be struck here, and this government is committed to working with all stakeholders to get this right. I, like most, if not all of you, will have more than one licensing authority in my constituency. Our constituents do not live their lives within the boundaries of a local authority. Their lives will take them across borders frequently. They may live in one area, work in another, socialise in a third, but they may still prefer to use their tried and tested, trusted local operator. So it's important that whatever actions this government does take are examined in detail with all the possible benefits and consequences fully understood. Our taxi and PHV industry is, on the whole, well regulated in terms of safety. We are all too aware of the failings in the past and the awful consequences of those of the most vulnerable in society. It cannot and must not ever happen again. Since these failings were identified, much has changed. Anyone who wishes to become a driver must be considered fit and proper to do so before any licence is granted. I thank the Honourable Member for Telford for their contribution. They've been a passionate and effective campaigner on this issue for many years. I'm aware of the report and I'm happy to meet with him to discuss it in more detail. All authorities in England now require drivers to undergo enhanced DBS checks as part of the fit and proper assessment. A national database must also be used to record all instances where a driver has their licence refused, revoked or suspended on safeguarding, road safety or unlawful discrimination grounds. In short, regardless of where in the country a driver is licensed, passengers can feel reassured that they have undergone extensive vetting. Overall, our regulation is increasingly effective, but it is far from perfect. And a conversation still needs to be had about how we ensure consistent standards for passengers across the country and how we put their safety at the very heart of the sector. After all, some legislation harks back to the days of when the taxi was a horse-drawn carriage, Madam Deputy Speaker. Some solutions may create more problems than they solve, which is why I need your support to work with local authorities in your constituencies to make sure that the authorities are using their existing powers appropriately. Safety must always come first, but putting up unnecessary costly barriers to obtaining a licence or making a person who wants to licence where they intend to work wait months before they can start to earn a living to support themselves and their families helps no one. Overwhelmingly, those in the sector and those who seek to enter it want to do the right thing and need to be supported to do just that. We will continue to support authorities to make best use of their existing powers. This must include authorities working together across boundaries in co-authorisation agreements so that their enforcement officers can take action against drivers and vehicles licensed by the other authority. They can work with their local police forces in joint enforcement operations or use community safety accreditation scheme to equip their enforcement officers with targeted powers such as the power to pull over taxis and PHVs at the roadside so they can more effectively do their jobs. Out-of-area working is not, should not and need not be the norm, but we need licensing authorities to ask themselves if they are doing what is best for passengers. Just as we're asking local authorities to see what they can do, we are looking at what we can do to help better regulate the sector. A range of options are being considered, and I welcome this debate and the ideas of my parliamentary colleagues. I hope that we can work together to find a solution and to continue to support a successful taxi and PHV trade, one that is safe, accessible and affordable, and one that continues to serve the wide range of needs of our diverse communities. Thank you.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order. Order.